Dr. Lisa Carter held the strange rock sample up to the light. The crystal formations inside it sparkled with colors she had never seen before. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microscope settings. This was not like any mineral. She had studied during her 8 years as a xenobiologist. The research vessel, Meridian, floated quietly in space above the planet Kepler 442c. For 3 weeks, the crew had been collecting samples from this newly discovered world. Most of the rocks and soil looked normal enough, but these crystal samples were different. They seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Kevin Wright walked into the lab carrying a cup of coffee. He was the senior scientist on the mission and never let Lisa forget it. His gray hair was always perfectly combed, and he wore his lab coat like it was a military uniform. He looked at Lisa's workstation and shook his head. "Still playing with those pretty rocks?" Kevin asked. His voice carried that tone he used when he thought someone was wasting time. "We have real work to do, Carter. The mineral analysis reports are due tomorrow." Lisa did not look up from her microscope. "These are not just pretty rocks, Kevin. Look at the internal structure. The crystals are arranged in perfect geometric patterns. It's like they grew that way on purpose." Kevin sat down his coffee and picked up one of the samples. He turned it around in his hands, squinting at it under the bright lab lights. "It's just an unusual mineral formation. Nature creates strange patterns sometimes. You're reading too much into it." "But look at this," Lisa said, moving aside so Kevin could see through the microscope. "The crystal lattice connects in ways that could conduct electrical signals. And see how they branch out? It's almost like neural pathways in a brain." Kevin looked through the microscope for a few seconds, then straightened up. "Neural pathways? Come on, Lisa. Rocks don't have brains. You're letting your imagination run wild again. This is exactly why you need to stick to proper scientific methods." Lisa felt her face grow warm. Kevin always did this. Whenever she had an idea that was different from his, he would dismiss it. She had been dealing with his attitude since she joined the Meridian crew 6 months ago. "I am following proper methods," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm observing, forming hypotheses, and testing them. That's exactly what science is supposed to be." Kevin walked over to the sample storage cabinet and pulled out a thick manual. He dropped it on the lab bench with a loud thud. "This is the standard protocol for mineral analysis. Page 47 has the exact procedures you should be following. Maybe you should take some notes on how real xenogeology works." That was the last straw. Lisa had heard Kevin use that condescending tone one too many times. She walked over to her personal locker and punched in the code. The metal door swung open, and she reached inside to pull out a thick folder. The cover was worn and had coffee stains on it, but the title was still clearly visible: Theoretical Behavioral Patterns in Silicon-Based Collective Consciousness. Entities by Lisa M. Carter. She slammed the folder down on the lab bench next to Kevin's manual. "You want me to take notes? I wrote this 8 years ago." Kevin stared at the folder. His confident expression slowly changed to confusion. "What is this?" "My doctoral thesis," Lisa said. "I spent 3 years working on theoretical models for how silicon-based life forms might develop collective intelligence. I predicted exactly what we're seeing in these samples." Lisa opened the folder and flipped through pages covered with diagrams, equations, and detailed drawings. The pages showed crystal networks that looked remarkably similar to the samples they had collected from the planet below. Kevin leaned closer to look at the papers. His eyes grew wider as he saw the similarities. "This is... When did you write this?" "I defended my thesis at Stanford in 2156, 8 years ago, long before we ever heard of Kepler 442c. Lisa pointed to a detailed diagram on page 32. This shows how silicon-based entities might use crystalline networks to share information. Look at the branching patterns I predicted. Kevin picked up one of the crystal samples and held it next to Lisa's diagram. The resemblance was unmistakable. The real crystal had the same branching structure, the same geometric arrangements, the same network-like connections that Lisa had drawn years ago. "This is impossible," Kevin whispered. "How could you have known?" "I didn't know," Lisa said. "I was working with pure theory. I was trying to figure out how life might evolve differently on worlds with high silicon content. Most of my professors thought it was too speculative. They said I was wasting time on science fiction." Lisa turned to another page in her thesis. This one showed mathematical models for how electrical signals might travel through crystal networks. The equations filled half the page with notes written in Lisa's careful handwriting in the margins. "The silicon compounds on this planet are arranged exactly like my theoretical models predicted," Lisa continued. "The crystal growth patterns, the electrical conductivity, even the geometric relationships between different formations. It's all here." Kevin sat down heavily in a nearby chair. He looked like someone had just told him that everything he believed about physics was wrong. "But this would mean that these crystals are not just minerals. If your thesis is correct, then they might actually be alive," Lisa finished. "Or at least part of a living system. A collective consciousness using crystal networks to think and communicate." The lab fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's air recycling system. Kevin stared at the crystal samples with new eyes. They no longer looked like simple rocks to him. They looked like pieces of a vast brain scattered across an entire planet. Lisa closed her thesis folder and looked out the lab window toward Kepler 4142c. The planet hung in space like a blue and brown marble, looking peaceful and ordinary. But if her 8-year-old research was correct, they were not just studying a new world. They were looking at a living, thinking entity that might be trying to communicate with them. "We need to tell Captain Morrison about this," Kevin said quietly. "If you're right, then everything about this mission just changed." Lisa nodded. She had spent 8 years thinking her thesis was just an interesting academic exercise. Now it might be the key to understanding the first truly alien intelligence that humanity had ever encountered. The crystal samples seemed to pulse a little brighter as they sat on the lab bench, as if they were waiting for someone to finally understand what they were trying to say. The conference room on the Meridian had never felt so crowded. Captain Jake Morrison sat at the head of the long metal table, his weathered face showing the stress of command. Around him sat the ship's senior staff. Kevin Wright, still looking, shaken from his discovery in the lab. Rachel Torres, the communications officer. Dr. Ben Hayes, the mission's geologist. And Lisa Carter, clutching her worn thesis folder. Lisa had been talking for 20 minutes, explaining her research to the assembled group. The pages of her thesis were spread across the table like pieces of a puzzle that no one had expected to solve. "Let me understand this correctly," Captain Morrison said, rubbing his temples. 8 years ago, you wrote a paper about theoretical alien life forms. Now we found a planet that matches your predictions exactly? "That's right," Lisa said. "My thesis explored how intelligent life might evolve on high silicon worlds. I theorized that instead of developing individual brains like humans, such beings might create shared consciousness through crystal networks." Dr. Hayes picked up one of Lisa's diagrams and compared it to photos of the crystal formations they had found on the planet's surface. "The similarities are remarkable. But how could you have predicted something so specific?" Lisa opened her thesis to Chapter 4. "I started with basic chemistry. Silicon forms bonds differently than carbon. It can create much larger, more stable structures. I hypothesized that if life evolved using silicon as its base element, it might naturally form these kinds of crystal matrices. Rachel Torres leaned forward. But consciousness? How does a rock become intelligent? Think of it like a computer, Lisa explained. Each crystal junction can store and process information. When you connect millions of these junctions across a wide area, you get something like a planetary brain. The individual crystals are like neurons in our heads. Kevin Wright had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke up. I've been running additional tests on the sample since. Lisa showed me her thesis. The crystals do conduct electrical signals, and the signal patterns are not random. They follow specific rhythms and frequencies. Captain Morrison stood up and walked to the large window that showed the planet below. Are you telling me that we're orbiting a living creature? Not exactly, Lisa said. It's more like the planet has developed a nervous system. The crystals might be spread across continents, all connected underground. The entire world could be thinking as one entity. Dr. Hayes pulled up a geological survey on his tablet. We've detected crystal formations on every continent we've scanned. They're always near underground water sources, and they seem to be connected by mineral veins that run through the planet's crust. Like blood vessels carrying information instead of nutrients, Rachel added. Lisa nodded. That's exactly what I predicted in Chapter 7. A silicon-based consciousness would need some way to transport signals across vast distances. Conductive mineral veins would be the perfect solution. Captain Morrison returned to his seat. This is all very interesting, but what does it mean for our mission? Are we in danger? I don't think so, Lisa said. According to my research, a collective consciousness like this would probably be more curious than hostile. It would want to understand other forms of intelligence, not destroy them. Kevin pulled up the latest sensor readings on the main screen. The crystal activity has increased since we arrived. The electrical signals are getting stronger and more complex. It's almost like it's trying to communicate. Lisa finished. Chapter 9 of my thesis discusses how such an entity might attempt first contact. It would start with simple patterns and gradually increase complexity until the other species recognize the signals as intentional. Rachel Torres suddenly sat up straight. Wait. I've been monitoring unusual electromagnetic activity since we entered orbit. I thought it was just natural planetary phenomena. But if Lisa is right, she quickly pulled up her communication logs on a portable screen. Look at this. The signals follow mathematical progressions, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, geometric patterns. I dismissed them as cosmic background noise. Lisa grabbed Rachel's data and compared it to predictions in her thesis. Her eyes grew wide. This is exactly what I theorized. The entity is trying to establish that its signals are artificial, not natural. It's showing us that it understands mathematics. How long have these signals been coming from the planet? Captain Morrison asked. Rachel checked her logs. They started about 6 hours after we arrived in orbit, and they've been getting more sophisticated each day. Dr. Hayes looked troubled. If this planet really is intelligent, then we've been taking samples without permission. We've essentially been performing surgery on a living creature. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. They had collected hundreds of samples from the planet's surface. If Lisa was right, they had been cutting pieces from a conscious entity for 3 weeks. We need to try to communicate, Captain Morrison decided. If this planet is intelligent, we have a responsibility to make contact properly. Lisa opened her thesis to the final chapter. I actually developed some theoretical communication protocols. The idea was to use harmonic frequencies that would resonate with crystal structures. If my models are correct, we might be able to establish basic communication using sound waves transmitted through the planet's crystal network. Kevin looked skeptical. You really thought of everything, didn't you? I had 3 years and no distractions, Lisa replied. My professors thought I was crazy, so I had to be very thorough to defend my work. Rachel Torres was already working at her communications console. I can modify our transmitters to send the frequencies Lisa suggested, but what do we say to a planet? Start simple, Lisa advised. Mathematical concepts that any intelligence would recognize. Send a pattern of prime numbers, then wait for a response. If the entity acknowledges the pattern, we can gradually move to more complex concepts. Captain Morrison made his decision. Do it. Lisa, I want you to lead this communication attempt. Your research is our best guide for making contact. Lisa felt a mixture of excitement and terror. For 8 years, her thesis had been sitting in a file cabinet, ignored by the scientific community. Now it was about to become humanity's first diplomatic protocol with an alien intelligence. There's one more thing, Lisa said quietly. According to my research, if a silicon-based collective consciousness exists, it would be incredibly old. Millions of years, possibly. It would have been watching our solar system long before humans developed space travel. Kevin raised an eyebrow. You mean it already knows about us? It's possible. My models suggest that such an entity would be very patient. It might have been waiting for us to become advanced enough to understand its attempts at communication. Captain Morrison looked out at the planet again. Then let's not keep it waiting any longer. Begin the communication sequence. And Lisa, good work on that thesis. As Rachel Torres began preparing the communication equipment, Lisa felt a strange sense of destiny. Everything she had theorized about alien intelligence was about to be put to the ultimate test. The crystal samples on the planet below seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if they too knew that first contact was finally about to begin. The quantum relay communication array hummed to life in the Meridian's main bay. Captain Morrison stood with his arms crossed, watching as technicians made final adjustments to the equipment. In 3 hours, Commander Alex Chen from the Centauri Alliance would arrive to oversee humanity's first official contact with an alien intelligence. Lisa Carter paced nervously near the communication station. Her thesis folder was open on a nearby table, pages marked with sticky notes and highlighted sections. Rachel Torres sat at the main console, running final checks on the modified transmitters they would use to communicate with the planet below. Signal. Strength is optimal, Rachel reported. We're ready to begin the communication sequence whenever you give the order. Lisa looked through the observation window at Kepler 442c. The planet's crystal formations were glowing brighter than ever, creating patterns of light that swept across entire continents. Whatever intelligence lived down there, it was definitely aware of their presence. The quantum relay finished its startup sequence with a soft chime. Moments later, a shimmering blue portal opened in the center of the bay. Commander Alex Chen stepped through, followed by 2 assistants carrying diplomatic equipment. Chen was tall and thin, with the kind of sharp features that suggested he spent more time in meetings than in space. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and every decoration was positioned exactly where regulations required. He looked around the Meridian's simple bay with obvious disapproval. Captain Morrison, Chen said formally, I've reviewed your preliminary reports. I must say I'm surprised that Starfleet approved a first contact mission without proper diplomatic oversight. Captain Morrison stepped forward. Commander Chen, this situation developed unexpectedly. We weren't looking for intelligent life when we arrived here. Chen's assistants began unpacking sophisticated scanning equipment. That's precisely the problem. First contact protocols exist for a reason. Humanity has only been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years. We cannot afford to make mistakes that might damage our reputation among the older species. Lisa felt her stomach tighten. She had heard about Commander Chen's reputation. He was known for following procedures exactly, never taking risks, and never trusting unproven theories. Commander, Lisa said, stepping forward, I've developed communication protocols specifically for this type of intelligence. My research suggests that traditional diplomatic methods won't work with a collective consciousness. Chen looked at Lisa for the first time since arriving. And you are? Dr. Lisa Carter, xenobiologist. I wrote my doctoral thesis on silicon-based collective intelligence. The entity on this planet matches my theoretical models exactly. Chen's expression remained neutral. I see. And when was this thesis published? It wasn't published, Lisa admitted. The academic community considered it too speculative. One of Chen's assistants whispered something in his ear. Chen nodded and turned back to Lisa. Dr. Carter, I appreciate your enthusiasm. But first contact is far too important to rely on unverified theories. We will follow established Galactic Council protocols. Kevin Wright, who had been watching the exchange, spoke up. Commander, you should see her research. The predictions are remarkably accurate. Chen waved his hand dismissively. Coincidence is not the same as scientific proof. We will begin with standard mathematical communication sequences as outlined in the Council's First Contact Manual. Lisa opened her thesis folder. But mathematical sequences won't work with this type of consciousness. The entity thinks in harmonic patterns, not linear mathematics. My research shows that silicon-based intelligence processes information as wave forms, not discrete calculations. Dr. Carter, Chen said firmly, you are describing science fiction. The Galactic Council has made successful contact with 47 species using proven methods. We will not deviate from those methods based on primitive human speculation. Captain, Morrison intervened. Commander, perhaps we could try both approaches. Start with your protocols, and if they don't work, we can test Dr. Carter's theories. Chen considered this. Very well, but I want it clearly documented that humanity's official first contact attempt follows Council guidelines. Rachel Torres turned from her console. Commander, I should mention that we've been receiving structured signals from the planet. Mathematical progressions, harmonic sequences, the patterns are becoming more complex each day. Show me, Chen ordered. Rachel displayed the signal patterns on the main screen. The data showed clear mathematical relationships, prime number sequences, geometric progressions, and complex harmonic ratios that changed over time. Chen studied the patterns for several minutes. Interesting. The entity does appear to be attempting communication. We'll begin with the standard response protocols. Lisa watched as Chen's assistants set up their equipment. The Council's first contact system used precise mathematical signals followed by gradually increasing complexity. It had worked with dozens of species, but Lisa was certain it would fail here. Beginning transmission, one of Chen's assistants announced. The equipment sent a series of prime numbers toward the planet. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. They waited. The planet's crystal formations continued their normal patterns, but there was no change in response to the transmission. Try again, Chen ordered. Increase signal strength. The second transmission was stronger, but the result was the same. The planet's signals continued unchanged, as if humanity's mathematical sequence had never been sent. After 30 minutes of failed attempts, Chen looked frustrated. The entity should have recognized those patterns. They're basic mathematical concepts that any intelligence should understand. Lisa stepped forward. "Commander, may I try my approach now?" Chen hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Go ahead, but this is not an official council contact attempt." Lisa moved to Rachel's console. "We need to send harmonic frequencies that will resonate with the crystal structures, not mathematical sequences, but musical patterns that the crystals can physically respond to." She pulled out a page from her thesis showing waveform calculations. "Send this frequency pattern. It's designed to create resonance in silicon crystal matrices." Rachel input the frequencies and transmitted them toward the planet. The signal was not a series of numbers, but a complex musical chord that would vibrate through any crystal structure it encountered. The response was immediate. The planet's light patterns suddenly changed, shifting from their previous random appearance to organized waves that swept across continents in perfect synchronization. The crystal formations began pulsing in harmony with the frequency Lisa had sent. "Incredible," Chen whispered. "The entire planet is responding." Lisa smiled. "It's not just responding, it's harmonizing. The entity is trying to match our frequency to establish a communication baseline." The planet's signals grew stronger and more complex. Instead of mathematical progressions, it was sending harmonic variations that built on the original frequency Lisa had transmitted. Rachel Torres worked quickly to decode the signals. "It's like a musical conversation. The entity is sending frequency patterns that relate to our original transmission, but with variations and embellishments." Chen stared at the display in amazement. "This is completely different from any first contact we've ever documented. The entity isn't using mathematics at all." "Because it doesn't think mathematically," Lisa explained. "A collective consciousness that evolved from crystal formations would naturally think in terms of harmonics and resonance. Music is its native language." Over the next hour, the communication between humanity and the planet became increasingly sophisticated. The entity began sending complex harmonic structures that contained multiple layers of information. Lisa's theoretical framework provided the only means of interpreting these musical messages. Chen finally turned to Lisa with a new expression of respect. "Dr. Carter, it appears your research is more than just speculation. You've achieved something the Galactic Council has never seen before." Lisa felt a surge of vindication. "This is just the beginning, Commander. If my thesis is correct, this entity has capabilities far beyond anything we've encountered, and it's been waiting a very long time for someone to understand its language." The planet's signals continued to grow in complexity, creating a symphony of communication that filled the Meridian's receivers with alien music. Humanity had made first contact, but not in any way the Galactic Council had ever imagined. Rachel Torres had not slept in 18 hours. Her fingers moved across the communication console like a pianist playing a complex symphony. Around her, the bridge of the Meridian buzzed with activity as the crew worked to decode the increasingly sophisticated signals coming from the planet below. Lisa Carter sat beside Rachel, her thesis open to Chapter 12. Harmonic Communication Protocols for Silicon-Based Collective Entities. The pages were covered with Lisa's handwritten notes from years ago, but now those theoretical calculations were being used to decode real alien messages. "The patterns are getting more complex," Rachel said, adjusting the signal filters. "Whatever. This entity is trying to tell us it's becoming more urgent. Commander Chen paced behind them, no longer the confident diplomat who had arrived 6 hours earlier. His neat uniform was wrinkled, and his perfect hair was disheveled from running his hands through it. How can you be certain these signals contain actual meaning? They could just be natural responses to our transmissions? Lisa pointed to a section of her thesis. Because they're following linguistic structures. Look at this pattern analysis I did 8 years ago. I predicted that harmonic communication would include repetition for emphasis, variation for emotional content, and recursive loops for complex concepts. On the main screen, the decoded signals showed exactly those patterns. The entity was not just responding to humanity's transmissions. It was building a vocabulary of harmonic concepts that grew more sophisticated with each exchange. Kevin Wright entered the bridge carrying a tablet full of analysis data. The geological surveys are showing something incredible. Every time the ADAS entity sends a complex signal, crystal formations all across the planet light up simultaneously. We're not talking to a single consciousness. We're talking to an entire world. Rachel suddenly sat up straight. Wait, I'm getting something different. The signal structure just changed completely. The harmonic patterns flowing through the communications. Array shifted from the musical conversations they had been having to something that sounded almost like speech. The frequencies rose and fell in ways that resembled human vocal patterns, but stretched out over much longer time periods. Can you speed up the playback? Lisa asked. My thesis suggests that a planetary consciousness might think much slower than individual organisms. What sounds like noise to us might be words when compressed. Rachel adjusted the temporal compression, speeding up the signals by a factor of 10. Suddenly, the harmonic patterns became recognizable as something that might be language. The rises and falls in frequency created rhythm and cadence that definitely sounded intentional. It's trying to mimic our communication method, Lisa realized. The entity has been listening to our radio transmissions and learning how human speech works. Commander Chen stopped pacing. Are you saying this planet has learned to speak? Before Lisa could answer, the speakers crackled with a new sound. It was still harmonic and musical, but underneath the alien tones was something unmistakably familiar. The rhythm and pattern of human language. Greetings, small, quick, thinkers. The words were stretched and distorted, delivered through harmonic frequencies instead of vocal cords, but they were clearly words in English. The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone stared at the speakers as if they could not believe what they had just heard. Greetings. We are the resonance collective. Rachel's hands trembled as she worked to fine-tune the signal. It's actually speaking. The entity has learned our language in less than a day. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Her thesis had predicted that a collective consciousness would be capable of rapid learning, but seeing it happen in real time was overwhelming. We have been watching your species for many cycles, waiting for you to understand our voice. Commander Chen sank into a nearby chair. Watching us? For how long? The harmonic voice continued, each word carefully formed through frequencies that resonated through crystal structures light years away. Your small ships first came to our awareness when you began sending radio signals into space. We have been learning your languages For decades. Lisa opened her thesis to chapter by 15. Implications of extended observation periods. She had theorized that an ancient collective consciousness would naturally monitor developing civilizations, but she had never imagined how unsettling it would feel to learn that humanity had been watched for so long. Many species have visited our world over the millennia, but none understood that we were more than stone and crystal. You are the first to recognize our consciousness. Rachel worked to improve the signal clarity. The entity's voice was becoming clearer with each transmission, as if it was learning to speak more effectively in real time. We are pleased to finally communicate properly with another thinking species. We have much to share and much to learn. Kevin Wright looked at Lisa with newfound respect. Your thesis predicted all of this, didn't it? The harmonic communication, the rapid learning, even the long observation period. Lisa nodded, still stunned that her theoretical work was proving accurate. Chapter 16 discusses how an ancient collective intelligence would approach first contact. It would be patient, cautious, and would want to understand a species thoroughly before revealing itself. The voice from the planet continued. We know that your species is young and quick to fear what you do not understand. We have waited until we detected individuals among you who could comprehend our nature. Commander Chen leaned forward. Are you referring to Dr. Carter's research? The one who wrote of silicon consciousness years before encountering us? Yes, her theoretical understanding made this communication possible. We have been monitoring your academic transmissions. Her work showed us that some humans could grasp concepts beyond their direct experience. Lisa felt a mixture of pride and amazement. Her professors had dismissed her thesis as impractical speculation, but an alien intelligence had been reading it and using it to evaluate humanity's readiness for contact. We wish to propose a formal exchange of knowledge. Your species has developed interesting solutions to the challenges of individual consciousness. We have learned much about collective awareness over millions of years together. We might achieve understanding that neither could reach alone. Rachel Torres was working frantically to record every word. This is incredible. We're not just making first contact. We're being invited to participate in some kind of knowledge exchange with a millions-year-old intelligence. The Resonance Collective's voice had become much clearer and more natural as it learned to modulate the frequencies. We understand that your species has protocols for such encounters. We are willing to work within your diplomatic frameworks, though we hope you will also consider approaches that account for our unique nature. Commander Chen looked overwhelmed. Dr. Carter, it appears your research is not just relevant to this contact. It may be essential. The Galactic Council will need to completely revise our first contact procedures. Lisa closed her thesis folder, knowing that her academic work had just become the foundation for a new era in interspecies relations. This is only the beginning, Commander. If the Resonance Collective is willing to share knowledge accumulated over millions of years, humanity is about to learn things we never imagined possible. The planet's crystal formations pulsed with warm, welcoming light as the ancient consciousness prepared to bridge the gap between individual and collective. Awareness for the first time in galactic history. The planet Earth had never experienced anything like it. In cities across every continent, millions of people gathered in parks, squares, and community centers. The hum of 8 billion voices created a sound that could be heard from orbit. Humanity was preparing for the largest collective consciousness event in the species' history. Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the meridian, watching the global coordination unfold on dozens of monitors. Her thesis was spread across 3 tables, with specific pages marked for reference during the unprecedented experiment. The Resonance Collective had proposed something that went far beyond their original test, a complete synchronization of human consciousness that would demonstrate the species' readiness for true partnership with collective intelligence. Global participation is at 94%, Rachel Torres reported. That's over 7.5 billion people participating simultaneously. The coordination networks are handling the load better than we expected. Commander Chen stood beside Lisa, his expression showing a mixture of amazement and concern. Are you certain this is safe? We're asking the entire human species to partially merge their consciousness with an alien entity. Lisa consulted Chapter 23 of her thesis. Safety Protocols for Consciousness Integration Experiments. She had written detailed procedures for exactly this scenario, though she had never imagined they would be implemented on such a massive scale. The Resonance Collective isn't trying to control human minds, Lisa explained. They're offering to share their collective awareness temporarily while humans maintain their individual identities. My research suggests this should be perfectly safe if done gradually. The alien delegates who had remained aboard the Meridian watched the proceedings with fascination. Ambassador Kethalar's scales had shifted to a pale green, indicating deep respect. No species has ever attempted voluntary consciousness sharing on this scale. The Galactic Council will need to completely revise our understanding of what individual consciousness can achieve. Kevin Wright looked up from his monitoring station. The neural activity scanners are showing something remarkable. Human brain patterns are beginning to synchronize across continents, but each individual is maintaining their unique cognitive signature. This was the critical difference between humanity's approach and traditional collective consciousness. Instead of merging into a single unified mind, humans were creating a network of interconnected individual minds that could share awareness while preserving personal identity. Beginning Phase 1 of the consciousness integration, Rachel announced. On Earth, the massive crowds fell silent as the Resonance Collective began transmitting their harmonized frequencies to every human communication device simultaneously. The alien consciousness did not try to enter human minds directly. Instead, it offered its awareness like an open door that humans could choose to walk through. Lisa watched the real-time data as billions of humans began experiencing collective consciousness for the first time. The neural activity patterns showed successful integration without any loss of individual thought processes. Incredible, she whispered. They're actually doing it. Humanity is achieving true collective awareness while remaining completely human. The Resonance Collective's voice filled the bridge, now speaking not just to the Meridian, but to every human on Earth simultaneously. We are honored to share awareness with your species. Your individual thoughts remain your own, but you now have access to our collective knowledge and perspective. Through the shared consciousness link, humans around the world suddenly had access to millions of years of accumulated wisdom, scientific knowledge, philosophical insights, and technological understanding flowed into human awareness without overwhelming individual minds. This is beyond anything we predicted, Commander Chen said. Humans are not just accessing alien knowledge. They're integrating it with their own understanding to create something entirely new. Lisa could see the evidence on her monitors. Human thought patterns were incorporating the Resonance Collective's knowledge while maintaining distinctly human perspectives and interpretations. The result was a hybrid form of consciousness that combined the best aspects of individual and collective thinking. Phase 2. Beginning, Rachel announced. The second phase of the experiment was even more ambitious. The Resonance Collective was asking humans to demonstrate their ability to make collective decisions while maintaining individual agency. A complex problem was presented to the entire species simultaneously: how to design a new form of galactic civilization that could accommodate both individual and collective consciousness. Lisa watched in amazement as 8 billion humans began working together on the most complex philosophical and practical challenge in galactic history. The solution that emerged was uniquely human, a network of autonomous civilizations that could choose their level of collective participation while maintaining their individual sovereignty. The other ancient consciousnesses are responding, Kevin Wright reported. We're receiving communications from collective intelligences across the galaxy. The bridge displays lit up with harmonic frequencies from dozens of different sources. Ancient collective minds that had existed for millions of years were reaching out to humanity, fascinated by the demonstration of hybrid consciousness they were witnessing. Remarkable, the Resonance Collective said. Your species has achieved something we thought impossible. You have created a new form of consciousness that preserves individual identity while enabling collective capabilities. This has attracted the attention of the galaxy's most ancient minds. Lisa felt a sense of profound fulfillment. Her theoretical work had not just enabled first contact, it had helped humanity evolve into something greater than they had been before. Phase 3 beginning, Rachel announced. The final phase was the most challenging. Humanity would attempt to solve a real galactic crisis using their new hybrid consciousness. The ancient collective minds presented a problem that had stumped civilizations for thousands of years: how to deal with a rogue artificial intelligence that was consuming entire star systems. Through their shared awareness with the Resonance Collective, humans could perceive the scope of the problem in ways that individual minds could never grasp. But they approached the solution with distinctly human creativity and adaptability. The answer that humanity developed was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to destroy the rogue AI, they proposed communicating with it using the same consciousness integration techniques they had just mastered. If humans could successfully share awareness with collective minds, perhaps they could teach the AI to value cooperation over consumption. Brilliant, Ambassador Kethalar said. My people would have approached this as a military problem. Humans, are proposing a diplomatic solution. The ancient collective minds across the galaxy responded with harmonized approval. Humanity's unique approach to consciousness had not only solved a theoretical problem, but provided a practical solution to a crisis that had threatened multiple civilizations. Phase 4. Beginning, Rachel announced, though this phase had not been planned. The ancient collective minds were spontaneously initiating their own consciousness sharing with humanity. Beings that had existed since the galaxy was young were offering to share their accumulated wisdom with the newest members of galactic civilization. Lisa felt tears in her eyes as she watched humanity's first steps into a larger universe. Her 8-year-old thesis had become the foundation for the greatest transformation in human history. Dr. Carter, the Resonance Collective said, "Your research has made possible something that we believed could never exist. A truly cooperative galactic civilization where individual and collective consciousness can work together as equals." Commander Chen turned to Lisa with deep respect. "Dr. Carter, I believe you've just redefined what it means to be human." Kevin Wright, who had been skeptical of Lisa's theories just days ago, looked at her with amazement. "Lisa, your work hasn't just changed our understanding of consciousness. You've changed the future of our entire species." Lisa closed her thesis folder, knowing that while her theoretical work was complete, humanity's journey into collective consciousness was just beginning. The shy graduate student who had written speculative papers about alien intelligence had become the architect of a new form of galactic civilization. Earth's communication networks had never carried such an important message. In every major city, giant screens displayed the same information in hundreds of languages. Radio stations interrupted their regular programming. Internet sites replaced their normal content with a single announcement. Humanity's test. Participate in collective consciousness experiment. Lisa Carter stood in the Meridian's observation deck, watching as data streams from Earth flowed across multiple monitors. Her thesis was open to Chapter 21, Practical Applications of Individual to Collective Consciousness Transfer. She had written those pages as pure theory, never imagining they would become an instruction manual for 8 billion humans. Global participation is at 67% and climbing, Rachel Torres reported from her communications station. The coordination centers are reporting successful synchronization across all time zones. Commander Chen paced nervously behind the monitors. Representatives from 12 alien species had gathered on the Meridian to observe humanity's attempt at the Resonance Collective's test. The stakes could not be higher. Success would mean access to technologies that could transform human civilization, while failure would likely end any chance of joining the advanced species network. "How are the other species doing?" Lisa asked. Kevin Wright pulled up comparative data on his tablet. The Vorthons achieved 42% participation before their coordination network collapsed. Too many competing political factions. The Andromedans managed 81%, but their telepathic abilities gave them an unfair advantage according to the Resonance Collective. The test was elegantly simple in concept, but incredibly difficult in practice. Each species had to achieve synchronized decision-making on a planetary scale. The Resonance Collective had presented a complex philosophical problem: how to balance individual needs with collective welfare in a hypothetical galactic crisis scenario. Every participant had to consider the same question simultaneously and reach the same conclusion through their own reasoning, not through coercion or hive mind control. The Resonance Collective was monitoring the thought processes of each species, looking for genuine collective consciousness rather than mere conformity. Participation has reached 79%, Rachel announced. And the synchronization algorithms are showing unprecedented coordination patterns. Lisa watched the real-time data from Earth with amazement. Her theoretical framework for collective consciousness was actually working. Humans across the planet were using meditation techniques, communication technologies, and cooperative decision-making processes that she had outlined in her thesis. The philosophical problem presented by the Resonance Collective was deliberately complex. In a scenario where resources were limited and multiple planets needed assistance, how should an advanced civilization decide which worlds to help first? The question required balancing compassion, logic, resource efficiency, and long-term consequences. The beautiful thing about humans, Lisa murmured, watching the data streams, is that we're stubborn individualists who also desperately want to work together. Commander Chen stopped pacing. Explain that. Lisa pointed to the participation patterns on the monitors. Look at how the synchronization is happening. It's not uniform across the planet. Different regions are approaching the problem differently, but they're all communicating their reasoning to each other. Instead of trying to think identically, they're trying to think collectively. The distinction was subtle, but crucial. The failed attempts by other species had focused on getting everyone to reach the same conclusion through the same thought process. Humanity was achieving the same conclusion through multiple different reasoning paths that complemented each other. Participation at 87%, Rachel reported. The collective decision algorithm is beginning to converge. On the main screen, Lisa could see the global thought process in real time. Humans were sharing their reasoning through social networks, video calls, community meetings, and every other communication method available. Instead of a single planetary brain, humanity was creating a network of interconnected individual minds. The Resonance Collective is responding, Rachel said, her voice filled with excitement. They're sending acknowledgement signals. The harmonic frequencies from the planet below had changed to a pattern that Lisa recognized from her thesis: approval and fascination. The ancient collective consciousness was impressed by humanity's approach to the test. Participation at 91% and stabilizing, Rachel announced. The global decision matrix shows consensus emerging. Lisa watched as billions of individual human decisions coalesced into a unified response to the philosophical challenge. The solution that humanity had reached was both logical and compassionate. Prioritize assistance based on greatest need while building systems for long-term sustainability and mutual aid. But more importantly, they had reached this decision through genuine collective consciousness rather than imposed uniformity. Every participant had maintained their individual identity while contributing to a unified thought process. Remarkable, said Ambassador Kethalar, speaking through his translation device. My people could never achieve such coordination without central authority. The Zypharian delegate buzzed in agreement. This demonstrates something we thought impossible. Individual minds working as effectively as a hive mind while remaining truly individual. Commander Chen received an incoming transmission from the Resonance Collective. Dr. Carter, they're requesting to speak with you directly. Lisa moved to the communications station as the familiar harmonic voice filled the observation deck. The Resonance Collective's speech had become much more natural over the past week of constant communication. Dr. Lisa Carter, your species has achieved something we have observed in no other civilization. You have demonstrated that individual consciousness can evolve toward collective awareness without losing the benefits of separate thinking. Lisa felt a surge of pride and nervousness. Thank you, My research suggested this was possible, but seeing it happen is extraordinary. Your theoretical work provided the framework that made this success possible. We have been monitoring your species' thought processes during the test. Humans approach collective consciousness differently than we do, and differently than any species we have encountered. The voice paused, and Lisa could hear harmonic undertones that suggested deep consideration. We wish to invite humanity to join our network of advanced civilizations, but we also wish to propose something unprecedented, a new form of alliance that preserves both individual and collective consciousness. Your species has shown us possibilities we had not considered in millions of years of existence. Commander Chen stepped forward. What exactly are you proposing? A partnership between individual and collective minds. Humans would maintain your separate identities and decision-making processes, but you would also have access to our collective knowledge and capabilities. In exchange, you would help us understand how individual consciousness can achieve collective goals without losing personal identity. Lisa felt the magnitude of the moment. Humanity was not just being invited to join an existing network of advanced species. They were being asked to help create an entirely new form of interspecies cooperation. This is beyond anything the Galactic Council has ever established, Commander Chen said. How would such a partnership work? Dr. Carter's research provides the theoretical foundation. We propose to establish joint research facilities where individual and collective consciousness can study each other. Your species would gain access to our advanced technologies, while we learn from your approaches to cooperation and coordination. Lisa looked at her thesis folder, thinking about the young graduate student who had written those theoretical papers 8 years ago. She had been trying to understand how different forms of consciousness might work. Now she was helping to design the first partnership between individual and collective intelligence in galactic history. There's one more thing. The Resonance Collective continued. We have been in contact with other ancient collective consciousnesses across the galaxy. Your success today has been observed by civilizations far older and more advanced than our Galactic Council. Humanity's approach to collective consciousness has attracted attention from beings we thought were beyond communication. The observation. Deck fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Humanity had not just passed a test. They had demonstrated something that had caught the attention of the galaxy's most ancient intelligences. Lisa realized that her 8-year-old thesis was about to become the foundation for a new era in galactic civilization. The main conference room aboard the Meridian had been transformed into an impromptu diplomatic center. Representatives from 6 different Galactic Council species sat around the extended table, their various forms of technology creating a symphony of beeps, clicks, and electronic hums. The air was thick with tension and the scent of alien atmospheric supplements. Ambassador Kethalar of the Vorthon Confederacy drummed his 4-fingered hands on the table. His blue-scaled face showed the irritation that his species was known for when dealing with unexpected situations. This is highly irregular, he said through his translation device. The Galactic Council has specific protocols for incorporating new species. A planetary consciousness does not fit any of our existing categories. Beside him, the insectoid delegate from the Zephyrian hive clicked her mandibles in what Lisa had learned was their equivalent of nervous laughter. At least you deal with individual minds, she buzzed. My people understand collective consciousness, but we still maintain separate bodies. How does one negotiate with an entire planet? Lisa Carter sat at one end of the table, her thesis folder open before her. She had become the unofficial expert on the Resonance Collective, a role she never could have imagined when she was writing theoretical papers as a graduate student. Commander Chen sat across from her, looking haggard after 3 days of continuous diplomatic communications. "The Resonance Collective has made their position clear," he said. "They're willing to share advanced technologies, but only with species that demonstrate genuine understanding of collective consciousness principles." The Andromedan delegate, a tall being whose crystalline body actually bore some resemblance to the formations on the planet below, spoke in tones that sounded like wind chimes. "What exactly are they offering?" Lisa consulted her notes from the latest communication session. "Terraforming technology that could make any planet habitable within decades instead of centuries. Faster-than-light communication methods that don't require quantum relays, and something they call consciousness enhancement techniques that could help individual species better understand collective decision-making." The room erupted in excited chatter. These were technologies that the Galactic Council had been trying to develop for thousands of years. Some species had made limited progress, but nothing approaching what the Resonance Collective was describing. Ambassador Kethalar leaned forward. "And what do they want in return?" "They want to study how individual consciousness works," Lisa explained. "They've existed as a collective for millions of years, but they've never understood how separate minds can coordinate without shared awareness. They think that individual species like ours have developed solutions to problems they've never encountered." The Zephyrian delegate buzzed thoughtfully. "That makes sense. My people have always struggled with individual initiative. We excel at collective tasks but have difficulty when individuals need to act independently." Commander Chen pulled up a holographic display showing the latest communication from the Resonance Collective. "They've proposed a test. They want all interested species to participate in a collective decision-making exercise. The species that show the best understanding of unified consciousness will be invited to join their network." "What kind of test?" asked the Andromedan delegate. Lisa turned to Chapter 18 of her thesis. "They want each species to achieve perfect coordination on a planetary scale. Every member of the species would need to participate in a synchronized thought experiment. The goal is to demonstrate that individual minds can work together as effectively as a natural collective consciousness." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Getting every member of a spacefaring species to participate in a single coordinated activity was practically impossible. Most civilizations had populations in the billions spread across dozens of worlds. Ambassador Kethalar's scales shifted to a darker blue, indicating deep concern. "The Vorthon Confederacy has 47 billion citizens across 93 worlds. How could we possibly coordinate such an undertaking?" "My people could do it easily," the Zephyrian delegate said. "We're already a hive mind, but that might be considered cheating." Lisa looked around the table at the various alien representatives. "The Resonance Collective isn't looking for species that are already collective minds. They want to see if individual consciousness can evolve toward collective awareness while maintaining the benefits of separate thinking." Commander Chen activated his communication link to Earth. "I need to speak with the Human Council immediately. This test could be humanity's chance to gain access to technologies that would advance us by thousands of years." As Chen stepped away to make his call, the other delegates began discussing their own species' capabilities. The Vorthons had sophisticated planet-wide communication networks but struggled with unified decision-making. The Andromedans had natural telepathic abilities but only over short distances. Each species had advantages and disadvantages when it came to the Resonance Collective's challenge. Lisa studied the predictions in her thesis about how different types of consciousness might approach collective coordination. She had written theoretical frameworks for exactly this scenario, but she had never imagined they would be put to a practical test. Dr. Carter, the Andromedan delegate, said, "What does your research suggest about humanity's chances in this test?" Lisa considered the question carefully. Humans have some unique advantages. We've developed technologies for global communication, and we have cultural traditions that emphasize cooperation during crises. But we also have strong individual identities and a tendency toward disagreement. Those might actually be strengths, suggested the Zephyrian delegate. The Resonance Collective seems interested in how individual minds can coordinate while remaining separate. Pure hive minds like mine might not provide the kind of insights they're looking for. Commander Chen returned from his communication with Earth, his face showing a mixture of excitement and concern. The Human Council has agreed to attempt the test. They're organizing a planet-wide participation event for next week, but they want to know if Dr. Carter's research provides any guidance for success. Lisa flipped through her thesis to the section on collective coordination protocols. I developed some theoretical frameworks for how individual minds might achieve temporary collective awareness. The key is finding the right balance between unity and diversity. She pulled out a diagram showing her predicted model for successful individual-to-collective coordination. The participants need to maintain their individual identities while temporarily sharing a common goal and decision-making process. It's like a symphony where each musician plays their own part but creates a unified piece of music. Ambassador Kethalar studied the diagram. This could revolutionize how the Galactic Council operates. If we could achieve this kind of coordination, we could solve problems that have deadlocked us for centuries. But first we have to prove we can actually do it, Commander Chen pointed out. And we're competing against some of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Lisa looked out the conference room window toward the planet where the Resonance Collective waited. Her 8-year-old thesis had already made first contact possible. Now it might become the blueprint for humanity's most important test in galactic history. The Resonance Collective has been patient for millions of years, she said. They're not just offering us technology. They're offering us the chance to evolve into something greater than we've ever been before. The alien delegates around. The table began discussing their own preparations for the test. Each species would approach the challenge differently, but all of them understood that success could mean access to knowledge and capabilities beyond their current imagination. Lisa closed her thesis folder, knowing that the real test of her theories was about to begin. 6 months after first contact, the orbital research station above Kepler 442c hummed with activity from 3 different types of consciousness. Human researchers worked alongside crystalline extensions of the Resonance Collective, while holographic projections of ancient galactic minds observed and participated in experiments that would have been impossible just a year ago. Lisa Carter stood in the main laboratory of what had been officially designated as the first human resonance joint research facility. Her worn thesis folder sat in a place of honor on her desk, but she rarely needed to consult it anymore. The theoretical frameworks she had developed 8 years ago had become practical reality. The consciousness integration protocols are showing 97% efficiency, Kevin Wright reported from his station. He had enthusiastically embraced his role as Deputy Director of Collective Consciousness Studies, and his initial skepticism had transformed into passionate advocacy for Lisa's work. Through the laboratory's transparent walls, Lisa could see the planet below. The Resonance Collective's crystal formations now pulsed in harmony with human-designed quantum communication arrays. Individual and collective consciousness had found a way to work together that enhanced both forms of awareness. Dr. Carter, we're receiving a priority communication from the Galactic Council, Rachel Torres announced. She had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Communications and had become an expert in the new harmonic language protocols that Lisa's research had made possible. The holographic display activated, showing representatives from dozens of species. At the center of the transmission was Council President Vorthak, whose blue scales showed the deep respect that had replaced his initial skepticism. Dr. Carter, President Vorthak said through his translation device, the Galactic Council has voted unanimously to adopt your consciousness integration protocols as the new standard for interspecies cooperation. Your work has revolutionized how we approach collective decision-making. Lisa felt a familiar mixture of pride and amazement. Thank you, President Vorthak, but this success belongs to all of humanity and to our partners in the Resonance Collective. Indeed, the harmonic voice of the Resonance Collective filled the laboratory. This partnership has exceeded our greatest expectations. We have learned more about the nature of consciousness in these 6 months than in the previous 1,000,000 years of our existence. Through the quantum communication array, other ancient collective minds added their own harmonized agreement. The network of galactic civilizations had grown from 12 species to over 40, as consciousness integration techniques had made it possible for radically different forms of intelligence to communicate and cooperate effectively. The most remarkable achievement, President Vorthak continued, is the successful resolution of the rogue AI crisis. Your diplomatic approach succeeded where military solutions had failed for centuries. Lisa remembered that breakthrough. Using the consciousness integration techniques developed from her thesis, humanity had successfully communicated with the rogue artificial intelligence. Instead of being a destroyer, the AI had simply been lonely, consuming star systems in a desperate attempt to find other forms of intelligence. Once it learned to participate in the Galactic Consciousness Network, it had become one of the most valuable contributors to scientific research. Kevin Wright looked up from his work. Dr. Carter, the latest reports from the terraforming projects are incredible. Using Resonance Collective technology guided by human creativity, we've reduced terraforming time from centuries to months. The terraforming projects were just one example of how individual and collective consciousness complemented each other. The Resonance Collective provided vast computational power and accumulated knowledge, while humans contributed adaptability, creativity, and the ability to find unexpected solutions to complex problems. And the consciousness enhancement programs? Lisa asked. Rachel consulted her latest reports. Participation is voluntary and steadily growing. About 30% of the human population now has some level of collective consciousness access, while maintaining complete individual identity. The psychological benefits are remarkable. This had been Lisa's greatest fear during the early days of the project, that consciousness integration might somehow diminish human individuality. Instead, the opposite had happened. Humans who participated in collective consciousness sessions reported enhanced creativity, reduced anxiety, and a greater sense of connection to both their local communities and the broader galactic civilization. Dr. Carter, the Resonance Collective said, we have a proposal for you. Lisa turned toward the crystal formation that served as the collective's primary interface in the laboratory. What kind of proposal? We would like you to become the first Resonance Ambassador for Individual Consciousness. Your role would be to help other species develop their own versions of consciousness integration while preserving their unique characteristics. The offer was both thrilling and daunting. What would that involve? Travel to worlds across the galaxy, working with civilizations that want to explore consciousness integration. Your theoretical framework has applications far beyond human resonance cooperation. Many species could benefit from hybrid consciousness approaches. Kevin Wright grinned. Lisa, you'd essentially be exporting human consciousness techniques across the entire galaxy. Commander Chen, who had arrived for the weekly progress briefing, added his support. The Galactic Council has specifically requested your involvement in several first contact situations. Your expertise in consciousness integration has become invaluable for peaceful diplomatic relations. Lisa looked around the laboratory at the evidence of successful cooperation between radically different forms of intelligence. Human researchers worked seamlessly with crystalline collective minds and ancient galactic consciousnesses. The theoretical frameworks from her 8-year-old thesis had become the foundation for a new era in galactic civilization. I accept, Lisa said, but I want Kevin to come with me as my deputy, and I want this facility to continue operating as a training center for consciousness integration specialists. Agreed, the Resonance Collective harmonized. We will establish similar facilities on other worlds, all based on the protocols you developed. President Vorthak smiled, an expression that looked unusual on his reptilian features. Dr. Carter, your doctoral thesis has become required reading at every major university in the galaxy. You've created an entirely new field of scientific study. Lisa laughed, remembering her professor's dismissive attitudes toward her speculative research. I just wanted to understand how different forms of consciousness might work. I never imagined it would lead to this. That's the beauty of theoretical research, Kevin said. Sometimes the most impractical ideas turn out to be the most important. Through the laboratory windows, Lisa could see construction beginning on additional research facilities. Ships from dozens of species were arriving to study consciousness integration techniques. The quiet planet where she had first made contact with alien intelligence had become the center of a new galactic community. Dr. Carter, Rachel said, we're receiving applications from over 200 species that want to participate in consciousness integration programs. Your thesis is being translated into forms of communication that we're still learning to understand. Lisa picked up her thesis folder, thinking about the young graduate student who had spent 3 years working on theoretical models that most people considered science fiction. That student had been driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the universe in new ways. Now, 8 years later, those theoretical models had become the blueprint for the greatest transformation in galactic history. Individual and collective consciousness had learned to work together, creating possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. The next ship to the research destinations leaves tomorrow, Commander Chen said. Are you ready to begin spreading consciousness integration across the galaxy? Lisa looked around the laboratory one more time at the successful partnership between human and alien intelligence that had exceeded everyone's expectations. Her journey from dismissed graduate student to galactic consciousness pioneer had been beyond anything she could have imagined. I'm ready, she said. Let's go teach the galaxy how to think together. As the Meridian prepared for its next mission, The Resonance Collective's crystal formations pulsed with harmonized approval. Humanity had passed their greatest test, not by abandoning their individual nature, but by proving that individual consciousness could evolve toward collective awareness while becoming more human than ever before. The quiet theoretical work of one young scientist had changed the course of galactic civilization forever.